victory for democracy recently, where they demanded that the Trump administration pay the billions of dollars that Congress had already appropriated to USAID. MAGA is having a meltdown, a stage 10 meltdown over Amy Coney Barrett.
Even his lawyer was not arguing that he gets absolute immunity for all unofficial acts. His lawyer was conceding at the oral argument. There are some unofficial acts that he made in the role as candidate Trump that he wouldn't be protected.
The Supreme Court just handed Trump a ruling so sharp it could cut glass, like lemon juice on a paper cut. He swaggered in, convinced he had a lifetime pass to dodge consequences, but the justices shredded his hopes and handed him a mirror instead. Now he's pacing around Mar-a-Lago, face reddening like his signature tie, ranting about immunity like it's a coupon he missed out on. This isn't just another legal decision. It's the wake-up call that even reality TV villains get voted off eventually. Reality just caught up with him, and the show's over.
Breaking news, historic news, unprecedented news. Chief Justice John Roberts, not waiting around for a court hearing or a case to write it in, has opened a dialogue and rebuked Donald Trump in public, telling him to back off calls to impeach federal judges, that's not the way. The way is through appeal. What got his ire up? What got Chief Justice Roberts' ire up this morning? Donald Trump posting on social media a blatant, violent attack on the chief judge of the D.C.
No one's above the law in the United States. That's a foundational principle.
And nobody is above the law in this country, and that includes the President of the United States.
No person in this country, no matter how high or powerful, is above the law.
I believe that no one is above the law under our system, and that includes the president. The president is fully bound by the law, the Constitution, and statute.
Fully bound by the law, the constitutions, and statutes.
Before we dive in, smash that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss this. Donald Trump has faced plenty of losses throughout his life, from bankrupt casinos to failed ventures. This one's a big hit.
It's very important that the Supreme Court recognize that what he's doing is a delaying tactic, and that the American people, it cannot be the case that a president of the United States can attempt to overturn an election and seize power, and that our justice system is incapable of holding a trial, of holding him to account before the next election. That cannot be the case.
Trump's lawyers swaggered into the Supreme Court like they were about to headline a Vegas show, grinning from ear to ear, certain they were about to pull off a legal equivalent of a magic trick. You could almost hear their internal monologue. "We've got this. Immunity. Piece of cake." They strolled in, clutching their legal arguments like a kid with an ice cream cone on a hot summer day, brimming with confidence, blissfully unaware that it was about to melt all over their shoes.
Justice John Roberts, in a very rare public statement, is saying that impeaching judges over legal rulings that you don't like isn't how it works. It's not how the American judiciary is organized. This is in response to Donald Trump's completely whacked.
In Trump's world, the president should be untouchable, immune to prosecution, consequences, and even reality. Sitting behind the resolute desk seems like slipping on an invisibility cloak straight out of Harry Potter. But instead of sneaking through hallways, it's used to dodge lawsuits, subpoenas, and indictments as if they were mere raindrops. Their argument? Essentially, he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. And who could do anything about it? After all, he's the president.
What do you make of the judicial system's handling of Donald Trump?
It seems to me the bottom line is there something in our system that means it can't handle a Donald Trump, right? He engages in delay. He seems to skate out from under sorts of problems and challenges no other person could avoid. And I think that causes a lot of people to question this.
The justices, bless them, didn't even need to lean in on this one. Even the ones Trump himself handpicked looked at his lawyers like they were trying to pay for groceries with monopoly money. You could almost see the thought bubbles above their heads. Asterisk, this is your argument, asterisk, really. You want us to endorse the idea that the president is some all-powerful, unaccountable emperor. It was the judicial equivalent of someone walking into a chess match, flipping the board over, and shouting, "Checkmate." Except they hadn't made a single legal move. The whole thing was dead on arrival.
To this case, Donald Trump said he could assassinate his political opponents when he was president. He could stage a coup. And people thought that that was hyperbole and over the line. It is time we start to take him literally and seriously, because today, a majority of the U.S. Supreme Court did just that. In fact, Donald Trump, if returned to the White House and in the Oval Office, assassinates his political opponents as part of a plan to effectuate what he believes.
Chief Justice Roberts, no stand-up comedian by trade, practically delivered a punchline with his decision. No, the president is not above the law. No, he doesn't get a special pass to commit felonies in broad daylight. And no, presidential power doesn't come with a no-strings-attached immunity coupon. Roberts might as well have stood up and said, even kings have rules. Last I checked, we fought an entire revolution to avoid that nonsense. What's even more ridiculous is that Trump honestly thought the people he handpicked would somehow twist the entire judicial system just to keep him out of courtrooms. It's like hiring referees for a game and expecting them to ignore the fact you're committing fouls left and right, only to realize they've got the rulebook memorized and aren't impressed by your jersey. And Trump, you can guess how that went down. The moment the ruling hit, he probably dropped whatever Big Mac he was holding, stormed off to the nearest Mar-a-Lago and locked himself in his office. The all-caps, typo-filled meltdown followed. Asterisk unfair. Total witchy, asterisk the usual. You can bet he was pacing, demanding someone block the Supreme Court on Truth Social, like they were an ex who just won't stop texting.
Trump, well, you might get the view that maybe the job of the Supreme Court is to do what he wants them to do. Listen to how he thanks Chief Justice John Roberts like an orange mafioso following his joint address to Congress on Tuesday night.
Howard, thank you again. Thank you again. Won't forget.
Did you catch the won't forget? And yeah, the Supreme Court has ruled in Trump's favor a bunch of times. Remember the presidential immunity decision from last summer? But not always.
Meanwhile, Trump's legal team is probably back at square one, scrambling to figure out how to spin this into a win. Good luck with that. The Supreme Court basically told them, nice try, but no one, not even the president, is above the law, leaving them to pick up the pieces of what was supposed to be Trump's legal safety net. But let's be honest, the funniest part isn't that Trump lost. The funniest part is that he genuinely thought he wouldn't. That's the story of Trump's life. Surrounded by enablers who keep telling him he's winning, even as the walls close in. It's never enough for him to lose just once. He keeps finding new, more embarrassing ways to lose, bigger, louder, and in front of an even larger audience. This ruling wasn't just a legal setback. It was a national reminder that no matter how many times Trump insists he's untouchable, reality has a way of knocking louder. The Supreme Court handed him a giant mirror, and now he's screaming at his reflection. Meanwhile, somewhere out there, late-night comedians are popping champagne, already working on their monologues.
4 Supreme Court justices were entirely willing to let the Trump-induced darkness descend on America. But the good news is 5 Supreme Court justices were not. In a very real sense, those 5 justices today pushed back against Donald Trump's abuse and overreach.
The best part, Trump's legal team walked in thinking they were about to drop the mic of the century. They probably rehearsed it in front of mirrors, nailed every line, and convinced themselves that their argument, basically asterisk president equals king asterisk, was absolutely airtight. They thought they were strolling into a friendly room full of nodding heads, only to realize halfway through their pitch that they'd wandered into the wrong courtroom. This wasn't Fox News. Meanwhile, the justices were sitting there, like teachers grading the worst group project they've ever seen, probably wondering how anyone could stand there with a straight face and argue that unlimited power comes standard with the White House furniture. It was like watching a bad comedy routine unfold, an embarrassing mix of misplaced confidence and wild delusion. The more they tried to make their case, the more it felt like they were digging themselves into a hole, oblivious to the fact that the judges weren't just critics, they were the ones holding the shovel. The whole thing was a train wreck. And the only ones left impressed were the late-night hosts who'd already penned their next punchline.
Major breaking news to tell you about in the case of the United States of America versus Donald J. Trump. With permission from Judge Tanya Chutkan, special counsel Jack Smith has released a filing detailing never-before-seen evidence he has compiled against Donald Trump in his investigation of the federal election interference case. It begins with the defense of Jack Smith's entire case in light of the Supreme Court's immunity decision, which divides official acts from private acts, giving presidents immunity for official ones. It reads,
You could practically feel the justices mentally flipping through the Constitution, pointing at every line Trump's team conveniently ignored, like asterisk, did they even read this? Asterisk, meanwhile, Trump. You know, he was glued to the TV at Mar-a-Lago, waiting for his legal Hail Mary to land. He was already drafting smug posts, preparing to brag about how he's above the law. Instead, he got the judicial version of a slammed door. You can just imagine the tantrum that followed. Cue the frantic, all-caps rants, the furious calls to his legal team, probably with a few choice words thrown in. Maybe even some ketchup bottles launched at gold-plated walls, because nothing, absolutely nothing, enrages Trump more than being told no, especially when it comes from the very people he assumed would defend him. The rejection stung in ways he hadn't expected, and you just know that his ego wasn't going to take it quietly. The reality check was brutal, and while the justices were calmly working through their decision, Trump was back in his bubble, watching it all spiral, and probably wondering why the world wasn't bending to his will. And you know what's coming next? The storm of outraged social media posts, doubling down on the same tired.
Well, they called for an appeal, and as you know, they acknowledged what the judge said about no penalty, and there's no penalty. But we're going to appeal anyway, just psychologically, because frankly, it's a disgrace. It's a judge that shouldn't have been on the case. He's a highly conflicted judge, and they called for an appeal. So I read it, and I thought it was a fair decision, actually. So I'll do my little thing tomorrow. They can have fun with their political opponent. As you know, I'm